Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. Park Howell here, and I am glad you are too. Now, if you're a CEO of a company, large or small, the question we'll be addressing today is, are you actually preventing sales in your company? Now, I know it sounds ludicrous, but if you haven't changed with the times and you're expecting great things from your chief revenue officer, your head of sales, and your sales team without the proper direction from you, then you're probably the cause of lackluster sales. At least that's what today's guest thinks. Now, make it that she knows it given her vast experience in sales strategy. She knows that there is opportunity for tremendous growth for you and yours if you just change your sales story strategy with these changing times on how your prospects actually buy.
I've got this very firm foundation on the customer and focusing on the customer, what they want and need, and how to help them get it, whether it includes me or not. Now, as a CEO, if you have that same attitude and help your salespeople and support them, right? Support your entire company to be focused on what the customer wants and needs and helping them get it, you're going to build a different type of sales machine than you have now. There are some companies out there that already are doing this.
As Chief Sales Energizer, Alice Heiman is internationally known for her expertise in elevating sales to increase the valuation for companies with a B2B sale that have the opportunity for exceptional growth. Spending her time strategizing with CEOs, company leaders, and their sales leadership to build the strategies that find new business and grow existing accounts is her absolute passion. Her clients love her spirit and the way she energizes their sales organization. Alice is the host of the popular new podcast, Sales Talk for CEOs. She dedicates her time to local entrepreneurs by teaching at the University of Nevada in the entrepreneurship minor, which she helped inspire. Alice also serves on the board of several growing companies to energize and elevate their sales. When she is not guiding CEOs to elevate their sales, well, she can be found hanging out with her family, walking, snow skiing, sailing in Lake Tahoe, there are worse places to be, and volunteering in the community, or even just reading a book in her backyard. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Alice Heiman. Alice, my good friend Heiman, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here. I've been waiting and waiting to be on the show because I wanted to have my new website and my new brand story up there. And so now I'm so excited we finally get to do this.
Well, it's been a work in progress for 6, 7 months where you went through the Build a Better Brand story sprint with me and some of your fellow lady sales professionals out there. And that was a really fun time, actually.
That was, I actually went through it the first time, remember, in November. So it's been even longer. And
That's
then
right.
after the November one, I was like, Park, I need one-on-one help. I cannot do this myself. Please rescue me.
That's exactly right. And then right after the beginning of the year, you and I started working on your brand story, and in return, you started helping me with my sales. And for a guy that's been in the advertising, branding, marketing world for 35 years, the CEO of my own ad agency for 20 of those years, and now the CEO of Business of Story, I can tell you, and I don't even have to tell you because you saw it firsthand, the one major thing that I lacked above all my other lackiness was my sales ability and having a decided, intentional approach to selling. And you have been an absolute godsend in that, the spirit you've brought to it and everything you've taught me. So thank you. But where were you when I was like 21? Because I could have really used that advice back then.
Yeah, it's hard to know what we don't know. And I think a lot of CEOs like you start a company and grow it and build it, and they get enough sales. And then all of a sudden, there isn't enough sales. And they're like, what do we do? Because what they did before was very organic and it just kind of came to them. And now they don't have a process in place, they don't have an organizational structure for sales. And they're stalled. And so I think that's what happened to you as well.
It really did. I mean, I launched Park & Co., our ad agency in Phoenix in 1995, and I was very fortunate because I was able to start with a very large client in Forever Living Products International, which is still a client today as I teach and work with them in storytelling. And then I added Sky Harbor Airport, and I was a one-man band. So I started adding employees to help me get through this, and our work spoke for itself. And more customers kept showing up. And I really honestly was ignorant about sales, thinking all we have to do is good work and people will find us. And that's just not the case, because what happens, that may work for the first few years. And now you've gone from a one-man band to 18 hungry mouths in executives and creatives that you have to feed. And you realize that organic pipeline never works. It won't sustain itself, and you actually have to put together a solid strategic sales program.
Well, certainly good work is a good start and very important, because even if you get a lot of customers and you don't do good work, you won't get any repeat customers or any more business. So I think that's a wonderful thing. And the entrepreneurial enthusiasm that drives the CEOs when they first found their businesses is so important, because it does bring in the good work and they're excited and they don't really have to go sell. And even with the software companies that I work with, where they have a really good product and they get a few people excited about it, it sort of just explodes on its own at the beginning, which is awesome. But as you mentioned, it just isn't sustainable. And eventually you need more and more and more work, or you want to sell more widgets or more software or more medical devices or whatever it is that you want to sell more of. And you need to have a process, and it needs to be simple and easy so that everyone in your company can help engage the customer, and by doing so bring in a steady stream of new customers.
We're going to talk about how you specifically focus on helping CEOs become better at their sales and their team. And this will be a fun conversation, because I was that guy too. I hired sales professionals to come in and I couldn't figure out why they weren't selling anything, but I was clueless in the whole process. So we're going to cover that in a minute. But let's go to you and your backstory. You actually come from, a very legitimate sales background, with your father being one of the godfathers of sales and writing one of the very first books on sales. Can you give our listeners your backstory? And then we're going to lead up to, why did you feel like you needed to refine your brand story today?
Yeah, I have an interesting background, because even before I worked with Miller Heiman, which is the company to which you were referring, and my father and Bob Miller really did start something there. I mean, sales has been around a long, long time, and big companies were doing a lot to try to help their salespeople back in the 70s. But Bob and Steve got together and interviewed hundreds and hundreds of salespeople to pick out the qualities that really made a difference and the actions that really made a difference. And they were smart enough to put it all together in a program and a book that made sense, and created a methodology that people could use and still use very successfully today. But before I went to work for them, because that was actually later in my career, as you know, Park, I started off as an art major at a major university, and not really knowing what I was going to do. So I was at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and I was an art major. And the only reason I ended up at a bigger school was because I thought, well, if I'm going to study art, I might need some other things as well, because I'm not sure how this is all going to work. So I'll go to a big school with a good art program so I have more options, right? And then along the way, I kind of figured out that carving styrofoam blocks into something that I was going to later make into a sculpture, and doing some other weird things, wasn't really going to do it for me. I loved some of the things I did, like weaving and dyeing fabrics and yarn and things like that, and then weaving things. And I love the photography, but I thought, how on earth am I going to make a living doing this? And it was all crazy and jumbled up. And I was like, what am I going to do? So I didn't go, "Oh, I'll go into business or I'll go into sales." I didn't say that. I didn't know what I was gonna do, and I finally, I had like a mid-college crisis, finally figured it out, and decided to go into teaching because I could use what I loved about art, and I loved kids, and I thought, "Well, this will be great. I'll be a teacher." And so it was. I graduated and I became a teacher, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. Went back and got a master's degree in education. So I have, I taught special education and elementary education, and then I was a reading specialist for the bulk of the time that I was teaching. So all of that, 13 years of that before I went into the business world. And at that time, that I started thinking about going into the business world, I had been doing projects for Miller Heiman. And so that got me a little taste of it, got my feet wet, so to say. And then my dad kept asking me, "Hey, why don't you come work for the company full time?" He and his wife were doing really well, and they wanted me to come in and help them with their curriculum, not sales. Right? Isn't this crazy? And so I did. I finally did go to work for them full time and worked on their curriculum. I always say I did the Vulcan mind meld with my dad because I had to learn really quickly all of the things that he had put into those books early on in the years when he did work with Bob Miller. And I had to quickly absorb all of that. If you guys don't know what the Vulcan mind meld is, Google it. And and so I absorbed all of that and started working on all of the curriculum. And then, of course, I was teaching the curriculum and then training the trainers and working with some of the largest clients that we had, like Hewlett Packard, Fidelity Investments, AT&T, Dow Chemical, and I could go on and on. And so I sort of got launched or catapulted right into the world of corporate sales.
But it's not really so crazy, is it? If you think about your interest and background in art and then leading into education, where those two worlds came together. So you were helping to design how that curriculum is articulated or was articulated through the workbooks and so forth. So it seems like those two worlds came together beautifully to now land you in the sales world.
Yeah, it's interesting because everything that I did prior to being in this sales strategy world really helped me. And I think it gives me a different perspective than a lot of people who may have grown up in sales or grown up in corporate America and moved their way through the ranks and then they left corporate America and became a sales consultant. And I have many friends, who do sales training and sales coaching and sales consulting and came up the ranks that way. Because I came from a different direction, I just feel like I have a different perspective a lot of times than other people do. And I really do bring the art into it in a different sort of a way. It's that creativity of being able to look at the problem a little bit differently and perhaps solve it a little bit differently than maybe you would have otherwise because I have that creative side. It seems to also help people just become energized because of the way maybe that I talk about it and the way that I do some things a little bit differently.
So you've been in sales activation and not training as much as consulting and developing strategies for CEOs. You've been doing it for a long time. Why did you decide at the end of 2020 that you needed to refresh the Alice Heiman brand story?
Yeah, that is really kind of an interesting path. And I'll tell you that when I left Miller Heiman, I was actually only there 3 years because at that time, my dad had decided that he was gonna sell the company, and he and my stepmom had bought the business from Bob Miller, I don't know, in the late '80s, and then had really grown it tremendously, but they just decided, "Okay, we're not gonna be the ones to take it to the next level," and they sold it to a private equity firm. So knowing that, I had left and started my own company, sort of accidentally. I call myself an accidental entrepreneur, although I'm very entrepreneurial and always have been. But I sort of fell into it and started working in the .com with all of these companies that were funded and really needed rapid growth. And that's how I really got into working with CEOs to help them grow their company and grow the valuation. But I sort of thought of myself and positioned myself as a sales generalist because although I would work with a CEO and usually I would start the conversation with like a senior sales leader of some type. And then I would meet the CEO and we'd work out what the strategy would be and what needed to be done. And then I did work with the frontline sales leaders and the sales teams to help change things and help the company really engage with the customers that they truly wanted to have. So I've been doing things the same way for a long time, although 20 plus years ago, I would spend more time with the sales team and I would actually provide some training and do some of the things that I don't do now. Like I would coach the salespeople and coach frontline sales managers. And over the many years, what I realized is all of the work that I did with salespeople and sales leaders just didn't make enough difference if the CEO wasn't on board with the vision for sales, the direction, really on board with who the customer was, and really able to support sales in the way that was needed, either with funding or with organizational structure or with more people or helping marketing and sales and customer success work together. If they weren't able to do those things, all the training and all the coaching that I did only moved them a very small amount forward. And so I would spend more and more time with the CEO and the senior leaders, but I had never repositioned myself. And so even though I was doing that, I wasn't really attracting the audience that I really wanted to work with because I looked like a sales generalist on my website, on all my social media. And people would be like, "Oh, you do sales training," or "Oh, you do marketing," or "Oh, you do," and I'd be like, "No, no, no." But it's my own fault because I didn't brand myself well.
Yeah, it's always easier to do that for other people, isn't it, than to take our own advice, take our own medicine, and do it for ourselves. So we did arrive at really, well, you feel like a very powerful position for you in the sales world. And God knows there's multitudes of sales professionals out there. And so it's even more important in this day and age to focus anyone's brand story. And at the core of yours, we begin with the and button. Therefore, when we understand what position you really hold in the marketplace that makes you more distinctive, different than your customers. And off of that ABT, we build everything else. So we need to roll out for our listeners, Alice Heiman's ABT.
Oh, yes, and this was painful. I have to tell the listeners out there, this brand work was painful for me, but thank goodness that Park helped me. And there was a couple points, Park, where I was just so stuck and you literally had to like do it for me and feed it back to me and then I could move an inch forward. But I feel really good about the positioning we ended up with because it truly does speak directly to the CEO as the primary target audience, which is who I've always had as my primary target. But let me read it to you all. As CEO, you have positioned your company for tremendous growth, but sales are lackluster because the strategy you support won't get you there. Therefore, Alice Heiman will help you define the precise strategy based on your values to easily elevate sales and increase your valuation.
Bam! Nicely
Wow.
done.
Love it, right? And I think, you really helped me with some of the words when we went through all those exercises and picked out the words. It made a huge difference because I'm not just working with any CEOs. I'm working with CEOs who want tremendous growth and can have it. The marketplace is there and they can have that growth if they can get their sales strategy to support it, right? But their results aren't what they want right now. And I also loved when we started using when elevate, you said elevate. That's what you do. You elevate sales. And I was like, wow, yeah, that's exactly it. It's like take it to the next level. And then, of course, what most CEOs want is a higher valuation for their company because then they have freedom and many, many choices, right? So they can either borrow money They can go find investors, they can hire more people, they can exit their company, they can leave a healthy company to the next generation. They just have so many more choices when the valuation is there and it's supported by the sales. So I feel really good about the positioning and about this ABT that was so painful for me, but now I love it.
Well, again, it's hard to do it on yourself. And I quite often play a psychologist, I think, at least on TV when I'm doing brand work, because it's hard to dig up these emotions and you know what you value, you know what you believe in. It's just, how do you say it? And it's really hard unless you're working with someone else from the outside looking in who can play the fool, which I'm really good at, by the way, and say, well, Alice, what about this? And what about that? I think one of my favorite lines that came out of all of this in crafting your brand story is this concept of helping CEOs really leverage what they value in their sales strategy to increase the valuation of their company, and that play off of what they value for the overall good valuation of the company. I really thought that was fun. And you've done a great job on your new website, folks. Check her website out at aliceheiman.com, and you can see how her brand story has come together and is playing itself out now.
Well, and thank you. And what I think was so important is I couldn't have built that website without the words, right? So I had new photography, which is fabulous, and I'm getting lots of compliments on it. Many thanks to Digiman Studios. I have to call them out because they've just done a tremendous job and they've been my photographers for a long time. But that would not have been enough to get a CEO to pay attention. CEOs are very busy and they just don't have time to try to figure out whether this is for them or not. And so having all of these words ready so that when Luis, who is an amazing designer, his a company is called Noble Candy, and when he designed it, he could design around the words that you and I put together. And just thinking through all of the content that was needed for each different page really helped frame it up and helped him put in the right photography and the right design to lead the person looking at the web page to what they need. And so I feel like it's going to help people who land there, the CEOs who land there, or the people who support CEOs who land there to know that this is the right place to get what they need if they're trying to increase their sales and their valuation.
Well, and I also commend your boldness, Alice, because in the B2B world, you don't see a lot of boldness. And when you land on her website, it takes you to the core of the story, and it asks the very first question in the headline: could you be preventing sales? Question mark. The you being, of course, the CEO. And then she goes on to say, as CEO, you've positioned your company for tremendous growth, but your sales aren't supporting it. Could you be the one preventing sales? It's a shorter version of her overall brand narrative, ABT, but works extraordinarily powerful to call them out, ask for accountability, and say, if this is you, I can help. And why I really like how you led with that is because to a CEO, I think they're going to say, for the right ones. Now, some of them may take offense to it, and they're probably not your best customer.
Right.
But the one that it lands with, or the hundreds that it lands with, says, Alice gets me. God, she's right. Oh my goodness, I need someone that refreshing with that kind of spirit, with that kind of openness on my team to help me get my act together. And I'm assuming that's what most CEOs feel like. If the sales aren't happening, they may be pushing that off on someone else until you call them out and say, actually, it begins with you.
Yeah, well, Park, it was your problem when I started helping you. You were preventing your own sales.
I was.
And it's true with almost all of the CEOs that I work with. And it sounds like, oh, I'm standing in the way. No, I'm telling them, go sell, go sell. But
Yeah.
there's subtle things that CEOs do and they don't even realize. Now, in one case, I had a client that sells medical software, and the CEO was fantastic, just amazing guy. And he had done sales earlier on. And the way he was standing in his own way, or in the way of progress and sales growing to the next level, was because he was allowing his sales leaders to continue behaviors that did not take them down the path of the new vision and the growth that he wanted. So he had to really take a hard look at that and make some serious changes. So he wouldn't have thought in the beginning he was the one preventing sales, but even by allowing certain behaviors or certain structures to be in place, or allowing certain types of interactions between departments at your company, when you allow those things to continue on, that is how you are preventing sales. So it's not like you're standing there saying, "Oh, don't sell," or "Oh, keep changing things so that it's really hard for the salespeople." Although some CEOs do that too. It's usually something more subtle, where you just don't even realize that the fact that these two departments don't work together, and you continue to allow that. That's what's preventing sales.
What, in addition to that, are a couple, two or three other of the biggest mistakes that you see CEOs making, or maybe it's just they're not even realizing it, that you come across time and time again?
Well, the one I see now is that they're depending on very old sales methodologies and tactics to work in today's market, and they just don't. So I
Such
have
as,
a CEO who sold way back in the day for a big copier company, who cold called and was the top salesperson, and it was fantastic, right? It was just so easy. Knocking on doors doesn't work, especially now. They won't let you in. um, Cold calling on the phone, that it takes thousands of calls to get someone to answer, and then out of those who answer, very few are going to actually talk to you, because they're probably just not ready to buy at that moment, not interested, whatever. So they want their salespeople to make more cold outreaches, send more emails, send more LinkedIn, make more calls. And when they look at the metrics, they say, well, there's just not enough volume of activity. The problem is, volume of activity is a bad metric right now, unless the metric, the volume is conversations versus dials or sends, right? So we have to measure the right things. And I think right now, what CEOs don't realize is doing more of the same is not working. We must do better. And what we need to measure is the number of sales conversations a salesperson has in a day with someone who could potentially buy from them. And very few companies are actually measuring that. Now, the sad thing is that when I talk to salespeople, they tell me I have very few conversations per day. I spend my day dialing the phone or using a dialer and, getting someone and then them saying, I'm not interested, or sending emails, or they're on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is amazing if it's used properly, but they're just not having conversations with people who can buy. So everything we do today has to focus around, how do we get more sales conversations for our salespeople? And that means we have to think about engagement and how we're engaging the buyers, which is different than it used to be. So that's number one. The other thing I see a lot is that sales CEOs and some sales leaders don't realize that the messaging that salespeople are sending out is not engaging anyway, and it's also annoying, because they're sending an email and then they're sending another one that says, "Hey, did you see my last email?" And then they're sending a third one that says, "I think you probably missed my last two emails." Now, those don't work. Maybe they work a little teeny tiny bit, but again, thousands, you're going to have to send thousands of those. And it's really annoying. And no CEO that I know answers emails like that. Do you, Park? Do you just wait for those emails to come to your box and answer them?
No, I love the fact that you said they're not only not engaging, but they're annoying. And I fall definitely into that annoying category.
Yeah. So they're allowing, once again, by allowing, you're preventing sales, right? You're allowing them to continue sending this awful messaging. Another big one is that we just don't see sales, marketing, and customer success working in unison the way they should. And again, back to the CEO. Why aren't sales, marketing, and customer success along with operations, right? Why aren't all these departments working together seamlessly to engage the customer and provide an exceptional customer experience?
And
Don't
what I've
know, but they're not.
and what I've learned, I mean, really is underscored working with you, is that you've got to start with a brand story. You've got to have your story dialed in. You have to have your position in the marketplace figured out. You have to figure out a compelling way to tell that story to your world and beckon them in so that they become a part of this story. But really, that's just the beginning. That's the platform. And as you know, Alice, and all of you listeners out there, that I am a huge coach on having you move from being an intuitive storyteller that all of us Homo sapiens are. Storytelling is intuitive to us, to be intentional about it using the frameworks, the ABT and the 5 primal elements of story and the story cycle system. Well, what Alice has hit me over the head with the frying pan is I've also, and you also, we all also have to be utterly intentional about our sales strategy and design a strategy that works for us, not a cookie cutter approach. And with that, Alice, how much of your work is based off of what you learned through Miller Heiman? Has that stood the test of time, and is it applicable in today's world?
100%. It has stood the test of time. And I think even more today than ever, the concepts in the book, Conceptual Selling, in that program, if you haven't read that book, please do. And the concepts in strategic selling s- absolutely stand the test of time. I use them every single day because everything that my dad and Bob Miller did to put together those methodologies was based on the customer and what the customer wants and needs and the way that the customer makes a decision. And we have really big buying groups today. They've gotten larger and larger, where back in the day, maybe 20 some odd years ago, 2 or 3 people would get together and make a decision to spend money on copiers, medical equipment, software, whatever it was, right? Now you're going to have 8, 10, or 12 people working together make a decision. So the salesperson has got to be someone who is collaborative, who understands the way people make decisions, who can guide those decisions. They've got to care. Like that's number one. Like let's just start with you've got to care. All of this was what Bob and Steve, my dad, believed. And so I've got this very firm foundation on the customer and focusing on the customer, what they want and need, and how to help them get it, whether it includes me or not. Now, as a CEO, if you have that same attitude and help your salespeople and support them, right? Support your entire company to be focused on what the customer wants and needs and helping them get it, you're going to build a different type of sales machine than you have now. I mean, there are some companies out there that already are doing this, but most are not. So as the CEO looks out to the customer and says, how do we best engage the customer? The entire company, how do we all play a role in engaging that customer and bringing them to us and having a great message when they do show up or when we do reach out to them? We have a compelling message that makes them want to have a conversation with our salespeople, right? That's going to be based on you really knowing your customer well, targeting them really well, and then building that story. And instead of telling the story of your company, your history, your products, your services, your stuff, right? Instead of telling that story, you tell the story of the customer and what they want and need. And you can use the ABTs that Park teaches, right, in all of your messaging and get people's attention and get them to want to have a conversation with your salesperson.
And so much of my work lately is working with sales teams, and I've got to credit that to you as well, Alice, because I was doing this work in the past, and you were like, Park, why don't you focus on that a little bit more? And we've got the ABTs of Selling online course. I've got the new book out with Randy Olson, The Narrative Gym for Business. And folks, I can tell you, Alice and I began working together January, or was it early December? I can't remember now. Maybe December. And we would spend every Monday morning working on both her brand story. And then in return, she was helping me with my sales and getting my sales act together through the strategy. And in that amount of time, we are now recording on the 2nd of August. My sales are up 220%. And I got to thank you, Alice, because I am following your advice and your process. And I feel like kind of an idiot that I hadn't been doing this stuff before, but you've made it easy and you've been able to get me coordinated, so I'm not having to worry about, did I follow up with that person? Did I not? And here's an opportunity here. So thank you for that. And now you've got the launch of your website, which is totally cool, but even more, you've launched your podcast. So what's up with the podcast and what's the idea behind it? And do I only have to be a CEO to listen to it, or is it for anybody that's trying to grow something out there?
It's definitely directed at CEOs, but it's for anyone who supports the CEO in increasing sales and increasing the valuation of the company, which should be everyone, right? But certainly sales and marketing leaders, sales enablement leaders, ops leaders, CFOs. Hey, all you CFOs out there, you want more cash flow? Okay, right? Support that CEO so that the whole sales organization can really make the changes needed. So I wanted to hear from CEOs who have built their sales organizations. Some of the CEOs are 5 years into it, some of them are 20 years into it. And listening to them talk about how they started, how they decided they needed a salesperson, how they grew into an entire sales team and with sales leaders, and now the role that they currently play in sales, I think is very valuable for other CEOs to learn from each other exactly how they did this. And as I say, the good, the bad, and the ugly of scaling a sales organization. It's not easy. So they share some of the mistakes they've made, especially with hiring. Like you mentioned earlier, Park, you hired several different salespeople throughout the time you had Park and Co. And none of them seemed to perform the way that you wanted them to, right? Why, I wonder? Oh, no, I don't wonder. I know why, Park, because you weren't able to support them in the
Throw
way
me
that they
under the
needed. You didn't have
bus.
a structure for them to work within. You didn't know what to do with a salesperson. You thought they would just go out and sell.
That's exactly right.
And I have to say that does happen occasionally, but it's very rare. So there's
Well, I'm a
usually
rare
needing to
breed
be,
indeed.
yes, much more support and structure available for them, along with the encouragement needed, to keep the momentum going. So,
Yeah.
yes, I think the podcast is really exciting because I get to talk to the kinds of CEOs that I work with and want to work with and hear their story, and they share it with the other CEOs and other company leaders that are listening so that they can take these ideas back and see if they might work at their own company.
Should we actually tell our listeners the name of your show?
Oh, that's probably a great idea, Park. It's called Sales Talk for CEOs. Now, that's another thing you helped me with because we went through all these iterations of things and then we're like, well, why not call it exactly what it is? Oh, use your words wisely, especially when you only have a few words as in a title. Good to use them wisely. So, Sales Talk for CEOs is exactly what the show is.
Sales Talk for CEOs with Alice Heiman. You forgot the little with
Oh,
Alice
yeah,
Heiman there, but
with
maybe that's
Alice
awkward for you.
Heiman.
Yeah, and we can find it on iTunes and any place that you get your podcast downloaded.
Absolutely. Anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts, you can listen, and I hope mine will become one of your favorites as well.
I think it will. And thank you for allowing me to be your first guest host and launching your inaugural show just the other day. Very exciting.
That was so much fun. It was so much fun to have you be the first guest, especially since You've worked with me and you know what it's like you said, frying pan on the head, although I'm really not like
No, you're
that
not.
mean, you guys. Just I want to make clear that, I don't really hit Park on the head with a frying pan, but it's one of those duh moments sometimes, that just hits you. So, yeah, that was
Uh,
fun. And I think we got a lot accomplished on the first episode to help everybody understand exactly what we'll be doing on the show.
Yeah, well, you bring a terrific spirit and enthusiasm, and you do make sales fun, and you make it so easy because, again, when I went through it, I'm like, duh, Park. I mean, couldn't you have figured this out on your own? But it's a little bit like doing your brand story. It's kind of hard to do some of this stuff on your own until you have someone from the outside looking in, playing the fool into your world and asking all those tough questions. It's really difficult. So thank you for helping me get my sales act together, and I'm hoping to continue that momentum. Let's wrap up, Alice, with 3 things a CEO can do right now. Besides hiring you to help them with their strategy, what should they sit down and do and contemplate?
Right now, if you take a look at the messaging that your salespeople are sending by email, the messages they send on LinkedIn and email, and if you listened maybe to a couple of calls real quick, I know you guys are all busy and you don't have a lot of time to do this, but if you looked at all of that messaging or maybe had somebody gather it for you and you could review it, you would be very surprised at what is going out on a daily basis by the hundreds and thousands. The messaging is not engaging. It is not compelling anyone to have conversations with your salespeople because it's probably all about your company, your products, your services, your history, right? And that is just not what your customers need. They need to be engaged in the story of how you're going to help them. And that's, again, what Park can help you with if you don't have that part down. Our little mutual admiration society here. Sorry, but it's true. You need someone to help you get that messaging down really well and make it compelling. So I think that's really important. I think that if you take a look at the leaders of each of the departments in your company, especially sales, marketing, and customer success, and ask them what they need. What would they like to do? And ask them if they feel like they're able to work together seamlessly and see what they say. And then you may have to make some changes there. And I guess the last thing I want to leave you with is this: every day, say to yourself and to your senior leadership team, what are we doing to make it easier to be our customer and harder to be our competition? What are we doing to make it easier to be our customer and harder to be our competition? Just every day, ask that question and see what you come up with.
I love that. I haven't heard that one out of you. After all the work we've done, I've never heard that little insight, and I love it. What can we do today to make it easier to be our customer and harder to be our competitor?
Well,
Love it.
I wish I had originated that, but I actually heard it from another friend of mine who probably heard it somewhere else. And I've just adopted it because it's just so clean and clear. If you ask yourself that question, you're going to come up with an answer, and it may not be what you what you like. So you may have to fix some things.
Hey, well, sales is just like art. All great pieces are inspired by something else, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So we've brought it full circle. Alice, thank you so much for being here. Where can people learn more about you?
Well, it's pretty easy if you spell my name right. Just go to aliceheiman.com. It's Heiman. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, but I'd really love for you to find me on my podcast, Sales Talk for CEOs.
With Alice Heiman.
Yes, with Alice Heiman.
Well, and thank you all for being here. If you love the show, send it out to some friends. Send it to your CEO. Maybe sales aren't where they're supposed to be. Maybe you're that chief marketing officer, revenue generator, head of sales, and you feel like you're not getting the support that you need, that you're looking for, maybe you're working from a bad strategy and you know it, share this show with your CEO. Share Alice's new show with the CEO, Sales Talk for CEOs, and really start becoming intentional about the strategy around your work. If I can help you become more intentional about your business, brand, and sales storytelling, visit me over at businessofstory.com. And as you know by now, we have this new online course, The ABTs of Selling, which was inspired by everything I've learned from Alice on sales and, of course, my good friend, Dr. Randy Olson, who he and I just co-wrote the book, The Narrative Gym for Business. That is the companion piece for The ABTs of Selling, which you can find at businessofstory.thinkific.com. It's only $35, 18 minutes long, 3 short videos from me that teaches you every element of the and, but, and therefore, and how you can apply it immediately. And per Alice's point earlier, the great thing about the ABT is when you get this foundational narrative framework down, we have seen how it bridges the hyperbole that comes out of marketing with the actual stories that are going to help you sell. It helps you not get ghosted in your email writing because you are writing engaging, compelling content from the get-go using that ABT. It helps you totally focus your sales presentations because the ABT makes you first think about what is my core theme? What is that one problem that I am solving on behalf of my customer? And how can I share it in a way that hooks into the limbic system and gets your audience leaning in immediately? Whether, again, that's an email, a virtual session, or you actually get to be in front of them in person. So check it out, The ABTs of Selling at businessofstory.thinkific.com. The companion book, The Narrative Gym for Business. And of course, if there's anything I can help you with your brand storytelling, visit me over at businessofstory.com. I hope you'll be back next Monday when we will have another amazing story artist right here for you like Alice. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening.